Hi, everybody. Matt Lawton here. This is the Astrological Winds channel. Going to take a look at the astrological weather report for the week of September 1st and 7th today. And if you missed it, last week in the weekly, I did the monthly for September too. So there's going to be a couple things this week that fill in under the monthly, and you need to go back to that because I'm not going to go back into detail this week on those things, which is Saturn going back into Pisces for a few months, and then also Uranus joining the retrograde parade of the outer planets. But the things I want to talk about this week: Mercury finally changing signs, finally getting out of Leo, where it's been for a couple months or so, and going into rulership and exaltation in Virgo. Very strong sign, but immediately squaring Uranus and getting in a yod once again with Saturn, Neptune, and Pluto. Then also, this is the week that the second eclipse season starts. We've got a full moon in Pisces next Sunday, and it is a lunar eclipse also. And we're going to talk about Mars square Jupiter too. First, a little business. Just bear with me. The Astrological Winds channel is a free video blog that I do on YouTube. And so if you have a YouTube account and you like what you see, I'd really like you to become a follower. And you need to put on your notifications if you want to know when the blog is actually posted. So don't forget to do that. It has been a podcast long before it was a video blog, and it's still available. The exact same audio that's on the video blog as a podcast. Go to your podcast app. Just look up Astrological Winds channel. You'll find it out there on at least several different blog carriers. Also, if you have an Instagram page, Astrological Winds channel does too. If you become a follower, then it'll show up in your newsreel, the link to the blog every week. And then the best place to find it also is my website, www.astrologicalwinds.com. That happens to have all my professional services listed there as a menu too. I've been an professional astrologer for over 20 years after 7 years of training to be so. I would really love to do some chart work for you, or anyone that you know that's looking for that. So take a look at the types of things I have there, and if you want to do that, and I can work with you on payments if you need to do something like that. So I'll get into some more details on that stuff at the end for sure. Let's get into this. And so the first thing that actually happens this week is on Monday, when Saturn goes retrogrades back into Pisces. Saturn's been retrograde for a little while now. You remember it went into Aries, and I talked about this extensively last week. It's going to be 4.5 months or so of Saturn being in Pisces one last time. And I'm not going to go into it again. Just please go back to next week if you want to get a review on what that meant and how it's played out in the world the last 2 years too. So Tuesday, Wednesday is the first big thing this week, and that's Mercury going into Virgo, finally changing signs after that retrograde period through Leo. And really, what a summer in the northern hemisphere, winter in the summer hemisphere, through that Mercury and Leo and retrograde period, where it was just a lot of heat, a lot of energy, a lot of people just being very individualistic in their messages, trying to push that, getting a lot of brushback. I mean, a lot of blowhard stuff, right? A lot of yelling at each other, a lot of who's the loudest and the last talking kind of energy, not a lot of listening going on, not a lot of receptivity. Yeah, just a really hot, burning kind of Mercury retrograde summer in the northern hemisphere. So we finally gonna move on from Mercury being in Leo and go into Virgo. And Virgo is actually one of the two signs that Mercury rules. And in many ways, it's actually the stronger of the two, in my opinion, because it's not only the ruler of it, it's also exalted there. And it's also the time when the mind really works at its best. And in Gemini, it's like collecting information, Virgo, but Mercury, but when it's in Virgo, it's perfecting that information. It's creating all kinds of new techniques. And so this is when the mind is really, to me, working at its best. This is when we can tap into ingenuity. And I think really everybody has some ingenuity somewhere in them. And so the mind is super sharp, it's super acute. It works on the details of things really well. It does not miss things. It has a procedure, it has a meticulous way of thinking and using techniques so that it guarantees that it will get the result that it wants. And when it does that, it many times gets excellent results. So this is also a time when we're very adept. Mercury rules the hands too, so like we're very adept at being crafty with our hands. And many times that is, and I've said this before, the connection of the mind and the hands and what's between them, the tools that take thoughts and ideas and create by a set process something that is useful in the real world. So that's where we can be really crafty. This is where all the knowledge that we've built up primarily about something can really serve us and be used expertly by us. We can be very discerning with our minds, very, and therefore judgmental. Now, that can be good and bad, in Mercury, in Virgo. It's good when we're being very constructive with that judgment, when we're using the criticism to once again improve these techniques, perfect them even more. What Virgo really wants. When it gets bad is when it uses that judgmental stuff and gets into non-constructive criticism, where it can really get judgy about the way people are doing things and think, oh well, I'm the only one, I'm the one who's right here. And and then really tear into others and the way they're doing it. And what Virgo needs to realize is there's a lot of ways that are right, that there's more than one way that's right. But this is a time where it's a great 2 or 3 weeks to do like intellectual work, to study and collect more information, to perfect the things that you already do have that primary knowledge base on, and just get more exacting about things. I mean, just like really use your mind well now to collect information and be able to distribute it in a way that's very effective right now. Now, what's interesting is, of course, it's changing signs, and I've talked about this all year, right? Every time one of these inner planets changes signs, it's hitting all those outer planets that are right at the beginning of their signs right now, which is Uranus, Neptune, Saturn, Pluto. They're all, right at the beginning of their signs. Now, Saturn's actually just gone right back into the end of Pisces, but still right in that area when a planet changes signs, that it's getting hit. So what's happening here is it's going to square Uranus and then form a yod with the Saturn Neptune conjunction and Pluto, which is quincunxing all three of those planets, and therefore on the long midpoint of those planets. So Mercury square Uranus first, it's really interesting there, because Virgo really does represent the intellectual mind really well. And the way I just talked about it, how expertly that can work. The Uranus part is our higher mind, our intuition, where we get like creativity to come into the intellect, and be downloaded into the intellect, so that the intellect can, work with it and form new things. So here we have a square between those two parts of our mind, the intellect and the intuition. And when the square is between them, it shows that there's an incredible amount of information and ideas popping up in our minds right now. Like, they can become just like thoughts that we're having that have been like, spurred by like maybe some piece of information we get, or it could just be information that we're getting. It's like, whoa, this is just kind of like mind blowing. It's just like, whoosh. blows up the mind, or it could be from like even connections with other people that really stimulate us, that really excite us and get us, like, once again, really worked up. The point is, the mind gets super stimulated when Mercury and Uranus are together, and the thoughts that go through it come at it so rapidly that it's really almost impossible to process any of them, or process them very much before the next one is jumping in there and taking over the mind. So, really, one of the big jobs when Mercury is square Uranus is to discern which of those thoughts may actually have something meaty to hang on to afterwards. So like, because a lot of the stuff that goes through us may not stick very well, once we realize what's involved. But there may be some just incredibly ingenious ideas, like lightning bolt to the brain, ideas. So that's one of the big things about this aspect, is trying to discern which one of those are later men. And those are the ones you want to get onto your phone, on your voice memo app or whatever, and get that idea down, before your mind goes on to something else. Because that's the thing with Mercury square Uranus. The information is coming in so rapidly, so quickly, that the mind is just going to jump onto something else, and it will forget some of these ideas. And some of them they're not for the scrap pile. You want to keep and work on them later when the mind calms down. Now, that's part of the thing too. This energy can get us really worked up. It can get us, like, kind of like that nervy energy. It can be exciting, or it can also be like, a little bit like resisting a lot of the changes that may be going through our minds right now. But therefore, it can get us, anxious. It can get us edgy. And when we're like that, we get sloppy. We get sloppy with our ideas. We get sloppy with our thoughts. We get sloppy in what we say. So, and it can be very, very difficult to maintain discipline. So we can get very scattered out in our thinking. We can get very impulsive in our decision making and quickly realize we made a mistake and regret it. So that is one of the true tests of this energy, is, can you discipline it enough that you don't start creating more issues and problems from yourself by making poor decisions because they're not thought out enough yet. So, it's really easy to overlook things right now because there's so much going on. And a lot of it is really exciting. So it can get us like, whoa, like, I'm really like, but then it's like, okay, it's scattered out. So, the job with the Mercury Uranus really is to discipline the mind enough that we find out what's valuable in that stuff. And then we also have simultaneously the quincunxes going to Saturn, Neptune, and to Pluto. So on the long midpoint, Mercury is on the long midpoint of Saturn, Neptune, and Pluto. And that means, once again, it's forming a yod, which I've talked about more than once, multiple times over the years on the blog. And the yod is a grand aspect pattern that is what I call more fateful than other ones, and it just pushes us along to a point usually that we need to go to. But the problem is, it can feel so foreign, it can feel so weird and awkward, that we may try to somehow start to control that ride, and that just can make it so much more edgy. It can make us feel so disconnected from what's going on. And when you think about a yod with the Saturn, Neptune, and Pluto all together, I think, this yod shows that our minds right now, are really under the influence of a lot of different ideas, like, that can be very different, odd, like maybe strange things that are out of our ordinary kind of thought processing, is a good way to say it. And it makes us very sensitive to that, like wanting to react to that energy, to want to really take what we're seeing and deeply look into it, go down and thoroughly to the bottom of a lot of the issues that we're having, and try to get some kind of handle on what's going on and how we might be able to resolve some of these issues. So, like I said, with the yod, there's a lot of fate involved in that. And part of what I think the point is that no matters what's coming up to us right now, we have to kind of just like, deal with it as it's coming up. It's a lot of things that are beyond our control. So we kind of need to just strap ourselves in and go for the ride and just trust that it's going to bring us to some important point in our lives. I think under this yod too, like what we're seeing inside is going to be very, very difficult to communicate to others. Like it may not be rational at all, and and therefore very, very difficult to get those ideas. But to you inside there's a lot of importance in what you're seeing, and that somehow you need to get that into your reality in some way. And if you can do that, this god can really bring some very deep levels of change to your life. We're going to definitely be sensitive to the energy around us and the energy of our own subconscious minds. And if we try to control this yod too much, it can backfire on us. It's really about, hey, letting go and accepting that we're in a time of great change and letting those changes kind of flow through us and each of us individually, whatever we're going through, and trust that that's what we need to go through right now. It can be really difficult to explain to anybody else what we're going through and how we're feeling inside. And when we try to, we may not get good reactions. People can be really disconnected with one another because everybody's like, chewing on their own concerns. So, this is a time of our life where our time really where life is taking us on a certain destination that's very unique for us individually, for each of us, and it wants to bring in great transformation, and it requires a releasing, it requires letting go, it requires adjusting. If you really want to see these ideals that you have work in reality, we have to challenge ourselves to clear the spaces, not only in our own psyche, but in our own energy fields and environments to make those things be able to come in and happen. So, this yod may be the way that we can do that, but we may not, because we may not be able to see that for ourselves. So, really, interesting energy to work with. And I really think there's like, Virgo with Mercury can give us a lot of discernment. And the Mercury with the Pluto and the Mercury with the Saturn can give us a lot of discernment. And it can take a lot of these Neptunian things, ideals, visions, and stuff, and show us, these are the things that we really need to work on. These are the things that we need to really let go if we want to bring those things into us and bring changes and transformation that we feel, is beneficial to us. So then the next aspect I want to talk about is on Thursday, Mars is square Jupiter. Okay. And this is really great. This is like firecracker energy. The biggest issue with these two, it is they think big. They're acting for the future. They've got big visions and grand plans. But it may be one of those things where we're really not thinking things out thoroughly. We don't have all the details, so we can make a lot of mistakes that are in relation to the details, and that's where Mercury and Virgo can help this, but can slow us down a little bit so that we're not so impulsive and therefore making imbalanced decisions, because that's what can happen a lot with this. It's like really Mars Jupiter, there's great energy to tap into. It's very positive energy too. It can do a lot of things, but we need to take a step back and discipline that energy, or basically we're going to waste a lot of time correcting a lot of mistakes of things that we impulsively acted on without really thinking it out. So, you really here, one of the big dangers of this too, where we can make a lot of those mistakes, is overextending ourselves, like our time, our resources, our energy. We may find out, wow, like I didn't realize how much, that it was going to take this much and I just can't handle it, kind of thing. But, there's no question that it will give us an incredible amount of strength and energy and the ability to break through barriers that we that have held us back before. We just need to be a little bit careful about getting reckless in doing so. But Mars Jupiter just wants to take more in. It wants to have new experience. It wants to have fun and be enthusiastic, and it can be ego feeding, so we have to be a little bit careful. Even if we're getting success and doing things right, then we can cop an arrogant or obnoxious attitude, and when you do that, once again, you start beating on your own chest. You're missing a lot of the things around you. You're getting really sloppy with things, and then all of a sudden you're making mistakes again. So if you can discipline this energy somehow, you can be really successful and get a lot done. And the tool is there with the Mercury Virgo. That's saying bring the mind in, use that discernment and judgment that Mercury and Virgo has to slow down a little bit and make the correct decisions, assess everything. There's an awful lot of energy that you can tap into on a Mars Jupiter, and that'll be good for like Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Really, Mars transits go for at least 3 days. And Friday is the day that Uranus goes retrograde and joins all the other planets that are outer planets, except Jupiter, if you want to count that as an outer, that are going to be retrogrades. And that will go into next year. I talked about that once again in detail in the monthly last week. So if you need information on Uranus retrograde, please go back to that. So the other big, big event is that we're starting our second eclipse season, and we've got a full moon at 16 degrees Pisces next Sunday, and it's a lunar eclipse. So, full moon, first of all, in Pisces means it's opposite the sun in Virgo, and the sun is actually conjunct Mercury, so it's actually opposite. The full moon's opposite Mercury too, and then you'll see where the eclipse comes in, conjunct the north node, the full moon, and opposite the south node, where the south node is conjunct Virgo. So that's where the eclipse comes in. Whenever the moon and sun get into the signs that the nodal axis is in, that's when we get our eclipse seasons, right? So here we are, moon in Pisces. The moon is very emotional. It's our emotions and everything. And Pisces is a very emotional water sign. And then we have the sun in Virgo, which is in an earth sign, a very solid sign. So the tension comes between them in the opposition of the sun and moon. The moon in Pisces is very nebulous, very abstract in the way it's approaching things. It's not very interested in taking care of the details. And what did I just say about Virgo with Mercury, right? That's what Mercury wants. Virgo wants. So the moon in Pisces actually just wants to merge with everything around it. It's like doesn't have very many boundaries, if any at all. It's actually seeking unity on all levels, but especially emotionally, and especially through the environment and through its connections with others, our relationships. So this is a very sensitive moon, full moon, and it will open itself up, and it will not have clear boundaries. And at times it can get overwhelmed when it does that. The amount of input that comes in can all of a sudden overload the emotional circuitry or the emotional intuition. And then we need to retreat and kind of almost go into seclusion and process a lot of those emotions. And sometimes that can end up feeling like brooding, even, it can feel like, oh, But, the other thing the Pisces moon does is it really opens up the imagination, right? It stimulates the imagination. It can get very inspired by many, many things. And so our artistic and or our spiritual sides really open up too. And sometimes that's what we retreat to when we're feeling overwhelmed by the world. We go into a place where we, can get artistic or we can get spiritual, and that can bring us the solace, the escape that we need from the real world. But the sun in Virgo is what's representing that real world, right? And I talked a lot about Virgo already at the beginning of this, but the sun in Virgo is just like really the opposite of Pisces. It wants clear boundaries, it wants to know the details, it wants like solid results in the real world, it wants concrete reality around it instead. And it wants to have a set way of doing things that makes it feel like it's comfortable, And so that's where we're getting this clash, that, these unclear, abstract boundaries versus something that wants a clear path and way of going and a way of feeling that that's the right way to go. And so, Virgo energy can get very, very critical and judgmental of that Pisces energy of just like, flowing through, flowing through, flowing through, and all that creativity. It wants to know all those details. How are we going to do this thing? And that's like, and Pisces like, oh, we'll just feel it out, So, so it can be interesting. But then, when you think about this one too, and it's an eclipse, and like I've said it before about eclipses, they are a season of change and they don't affect everybody. I would say on average, they affect about 1 out of 4 people, but like events will come into our lives during eclipse season that force us to make some kind of change, some kind of turn in our path that we really don't have much of a choice of. It's just something kind of happens. And a lot of times with the lunar eclipse, I'll be honest, it's almost something that we're feeling. We're feeling that the need for changes, and then they happen, and it's like maybe we're helping being an agent in manifesting those changes by just feeling them and thinking about them so much. But when you think about the moon in Pisces conjunct the north node in Pisces, and the north node kind of like where we're supposed to be going towards our dharmic path, our destiny, this shows that, yeah, like there's a there this eclipse, this full moon can connect us with some new destiny, some new path through some connection with another person or even a group that is like really faded in our life, that we're supposed to meet them. And it almost blends in with the yacht energy on, the eclipse energy with the north node and the nodal axis involved with the full moon shows that, yeah, there's a lot, once again, like the yacht, just a lot of fate right now. There's a lot of changes going on that are trying to direct us to a new place. And it requires like, moving away from some of the old stuff, letting it go, releasing old relationships, old influences, old psychological stuff that clouds the way we do things now. And when we do that, then we can use this Pisces energy to merge with someone else or a new group that brings us to a better destiny for ourselves. So I really, really think that, there's a real great opportunity to do that. And then when you think about that, with the South Node, even by the Sun in Virgo, it's showing that, yeah, when we have procedures and rules, they can actually get us stuck sometimes in a system where we get really narrow minded. And that's why we can get critical and judgmental of others and bring in that kind of negative energy that Pisces. That Virgo represents. So, so it's really interesting on that level because, and then when you think too, the moon is opposite Mercury too, right? That shows that a lot of our thoughts right now and that are being triggered from past psychological issues and patterns. So like that's once again, is that what this eclipse is trying to show us? That, this is a time when we can really, like, take a step back and take a look at that, see how our emotions can be attached to old patterns, that we all of a sudden get so subjective that we're shutting out any new clear information that we could be getting. So I think, that really shows there's the conflict between emotions and reason is, in the full moon, is also really being played out inside ourselves, and we need to maybe do this Pisces withdrawal and do an assessment of ourselves, and really take a, look at that kind of energy. Like, are we, blowing out all our logic and our decision making processes because we're stuck on these emotional loops from the past, and, and we're just doing things impulsively out of habit. So, it really, like I said, I think that's a great time to use the Pisces energy to withdraw a little bit and assess that for ourselves. And instead of, if you try to bring it out with others with the moon opposite Mercury, you're probably going to get a lot of talking and not a lot of listening, because people are stuck in those patterns from the past. Now, what's really interesting about this, though, the next aspect the moon makes is actually a trine to Jupiter, which is the ruler of this full moon. That Jupiter rules Pisces, and Jupiter is in really strong condition right now. It's actually in Cancer right now, which is the sign it's exalted in. And this shows that there's like a really caring energy that can be tapped into with this full moon. Like, the people you can make connections with, there can be this very benevolent, beneficial energy for all people that are involved in a relationship. And it's the trine shows there's this great flow, of this energy, very positive energy, where we can, like, just kind of, like, literally relieve each other of some of our pain, like bring each other some genuine sense of caring and love. And that helps us too, on a personal level, figure out some of the bigger questions that we have going on in life right now, some of those bigger, like, philosophical questions about life, and like I said, and then you combine that with the fact that that's the lunar eclipse, and it shows, yes, this can be some life changing stuff. And we can break away from some of the old criticisms, judgments, habits, people who trigger those things, and find and be more open to newer things that lead to our ideals. Then we can really be satisfied with some of the changes that can come right now. We can work with that eclipse and what we're feeling deeply inside. We can bring that out into a world that is going through a lot of changes right now. I think, part of this, too, is just remembering, that the eclipse is just trying to bring us to a new path. And it may seem like, when if it affects us, that we don't really have a choice. But this trine to Jupiter is like, hey, just flow with it. The yod is like, just flow with it, because it's going to take you to a place that will bring transformation, will bring new paths, will take us to a place that can be a lot more satisfying, because it may be much more aligned with where our destiny is at. So what you want to do in your chart, look where 16 degrees Pisces and Virgo are. Those are the two houses, or the axis, that those changes in your personal life should be coming through. So, like, if they're in your 6th and 12th house, and it's like, how are you serving others? How are you serving yourself? Things like that. How are you working? What's your health like? Things like that is what this full moon will shine a light on, and help you try to discern, are the things that you're stuck with, that are blocking you from going to new ways, and the new ways that can bring a lot of benefit into your life. So, okay, that's what I've got for this week, folks. Next week, I don't think it's a real heavy week next week. I don't think there's a super lot going on. Oh, yeah. What we are going to get next week is the Sun superior conjunction to Mercury. So they're both probably going to get a little bit involved with Jupiter on that one too. So that's probably going to be the main thing I'm talking about next week. Um, Otherwise, this is Matt Lawton. This is the Astrological Winds channel. And what I need you to do right now, since you just watched this free service, is to pass the link along to somebody else that you think might be interested in it. Really appreciate if you've done that before. If you can do it again, I really appreciate it too. Again, because that's really the way I get my blog to grow. I just feel like it's a lot more authentic when people are like, hey, I'd really like to turn you on to this. So please do that. And if you'd like to give a currency donation, the blog actually does cost me money to put out every month. There's a few expenses involved with it. My Cash App is $Matthew with two T's, Lawton, Lauten, or Venmo at Matthew with two T's, hyphen in the middle, Lauten. No amount is too small, you guys. Like $5 is fine, If it's helped you and you have a little extra in your tip jar for me, that'd be really great. Thank you so much. But the best way that you can support me is to check my website out, www.astrologicalwinds.com, where not only you can find all the blogs from the last few months if you want to refer to them, but my professional services as a professional astrologer. And there's a menu there, individuals and groups. I'm looking for students always too, either for tutoring or classes. If you're ready to get your chart done, or if it's your birthday month and you're ready to get a predictive reading for the next year, I'm here for you. I can do relationship charts, children's charts, deeper soul, fixed star readings, elections. There's a lot of different stuff. So check the menu out if you have a group and you're looking for some kind of lecture or workshop or class, question and answer session, mini readings, things like that. That can be set up too, and that can even be set up online. We can even do something like that on Zoom or something. And also, if you're a student or you're looking to learn more, I am looking for a couple more beginner students to do live classes with. Not willing to do it until I get a certain amount of people to do that with. But I do have podcasts available that you can check out classes via podcasts. And then also, if you prefer tutoring, I can do that also. Also, if you're a professional person or someone you're going through a lot right now, and you need like monthly or weekly or daily readings, I do that for people who can afford that too. All those services, check the website out, or you can email me at matthue823@gmail.com. That's what I got for us this week, folks. I'll see y'all next week, and we'll take a look at that Sun Mercury superior conjunction that will be going on in Virgo next week. All right, I'll see y'all then.